Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to this series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one, I'm going to be going through 3 zines, 2 for Shadowdark, 1 for Old School Essentials. The first is Carcass Crawler, which is the zine for, it's Carcass Crawler 5, which is the zine for Old School Essentials. This is the newest Carcass Crawler, it just was released recently, and it's really cool. It has new races, it has a lot of new monsters, there's a couple a short adventure, and then rules for poisons and level 0 characters and some cantrips and things like that. So a lot of really cool stuff. This one's 36 pages. I'm also going to be looking at Final Torch Issue 1, which is a Shadowdark RPG zine, which is mostly a setting called the Jungles of Karatha, and it's a really, really cool setting. It's a really cool zine. It's got a lot of new monsters, it's got a whole hex crawl with a lot of cool places, and it's got 3 full adventures with great maps. This is one of my favorite new zines that I've seen out there. I'm really happy with it. This one was sent to me, and I'm really grateful that it was. I'm going to be on the lookout for the rest of this series as it's released. And this one is 80 pages. And then the last one I'm going to be looking at is Book of the Dead, which is Letters from the Dark, Volume 9. This is another zine for Shadowdark. This is a part of a series. I've done most of the rest of the series in reviews. This is my is this my favorite? I think it's my favorite of the whole set by Chris Powell. I love ancient Egypt, and this is all influenced by sort of Egyptian fantasy. And it leans into 10th level, so high power level stuff, which is really, really cool. So anyway, I'm going to go through each of these in some detail. I'm not going to go through the whole thing of each of them, but I'm going to go through just a few of the pages and some of the, what I think are kind of the more exciting elements of some of these books. So Carcass Crawler, this is again just issue 5. Here is what you get in this book. So you get a couple new character classes, the Ratling and the Changeling, and you can get the character, so you can do either race as class or just the class, just the race separate. You get a few pages of cantrips. You get rules for level 0 characters in Old School Essentials, which is not something that's in the base game. You get rules for materials, basically weaker and stronger materials that you can use in blacksmithing and making weapons and items out of those. You get some poisons and a whole bunch of example poisons. And then you get a bunch of magic swords and rules for magic swords and making magic swords kind of more interesting. Then you get some monsters and an adventure that uses those monsters called the River, and then the Hag's Lair at the end of it. So it's a really cool book, a great addition to the Carcass Crawler set. I have the first 4 in print, and I think I'm going to get issue 5 in print from my friendly local game store because they tend to get them, and I like to support them when I can. So this is a really cool book, and the art, if you guys know the Carcass Crawler set, it's necrotic gnome, and so it's always good. It's always good. Here's the Ratling. Really cool demi-human class. You get this prehensile tail. Now, I'm not a huge fan of like running a random animal in an otherwise non-animal game. So ratlings, I don't tend to use ratlings or things like that. I don't tend to use the anthropomorphic animals in my games mostly. But I'm a big fan of settings like the old Redwall or Mouse Ritter where everybody's animals. I don't know, I think it's a different kind of game in my mind. Rather than being like, I'm going to play an animal person in a game with humans and elves and dwarves. I kind of keep those separate. Unless it's like a beast man or something like that. A minotaur, but like playing a rat, a giant rat or something like that. I'm not as big a fan of, but I could see taking this race as class or this race on its own and using it along with some of the other optional races you can find out there and building kind of like an animal set of races. I think that'd be pretty cool. And you've got a lot of, pretty traditional bonuses here. If you guys know Old School Essentials, you'll know how the stat blocks work and how the progression works and all of that. The rules for level 0 characters are really interesting. It's very much like other games that use level 0 characters, so Shadowdark or DCC, where your character is pretty bad. Right, this is very low level. The idea of using a funnel adventure and how to do that in this particular game, it's slightly different than DCC or Shadowdark, but it's the same basic idea. So if you have that little side panel here, it says funnel adventures were popularized by the Dungeon Crawl Classics RPG. In a funnel, a large group of level 0 characters is whittled down to a small number of survivors, who then go on to become full first level PCs. A funnel can be a fun way to start a campaign and provides a compelling backstory of the deeds that led PCs to a life of adventure together. So the way that you do it in this particular game, you roll a group of 10 to 20 level 0 characters. which is a pretty big group. Although, if you think about it, most of the time you're playing with, say, 3 to 4 players. And in DCC, I think you make 3 or 4 characters, level 0 characters. So that's about, 9 to 12, or maybe 12 to 16 characters. So it's right in that 10 to 20 range. And then you play through as normal. And this says that any level 1 character can be used. Any level 1 adventure, can be used. And then you control 3 to 5 characters. Now, it doesn't say how you're to do that. Whether you play them all simultaneously, or whether you play them one at a time and as they die, someone else steps in. I've played both kinds of games, and I don't know if there's a distinction between funnel and gauntlet, which is what Shadowdark calls them. I don't know if that's a technical distinction, where the one you control everybody at the same time, whereas with the other you do play them one at a time. But again, I've played both ways. I've run both ways. And I think it's cool either way. You do play very differently. The players have a different sort of approach when they're controlling all of the characters of the funnel at once, and when they're controlling just one at a time. I think you're more likely to get TPKs when you're playing everybody at once, because traps can go off, fireballs can go off and kill a bunch of characters at once. So you're more likely to get TPKs that way. But either way, I think it's a cool way of doing it. So it's super fun. I think Gauntlet's level 0 adventures, funnels, some of my most fun memories of running games for D&D or DCC or Shadowdark or Five Torches Deep or OS. Well, I didn't really do it for Old School Essentials. I haven't done it for Old School Essentials yet, but I think I want to. Maybe I'll do a Dolmenwood level 0 funnel. That might be kind of fun. Here are some of the monsters that you get in this book. You get the giant beaver, the freshwater hag, the Grindylow, and the were-toad lycanthrope. Really cool, some monsters. You get a bunch more on the next couple of pages as well. But I want to go through a couple of these just because I like the way that these ones are developed, especially the Grindylow. 18-inch tall aquatic gremlins with slimy green or blue skin, webbed claws, and wide frog-like mouths. Use their claws to grab onto characters or water vessels unseen and make mischief. Dwell in underwater nests of aquatic vegetation. Yeah, 18 foot would be a very different kind of creature. 18 inches. You have, a pretty cool stat block there, but I really like these this element of they're both pranksters and cowardly, right? So you're not really going to be fighting Grindylows to the death. They're going to be like, a little mischievous thing. And it's another thing that I might want to take for Dolmenwood. I'm always on the lookout for things to take for a Dolmenwood campaign, especially recently, because I'm going to be starting up one of those, as I've mentioned before. So great stat blocks, a bunch of new monsters, 8 new monsters that you get in this scene. At the very end of the book, you get a couple parts to the adventure. It's really one adventure, but there's part 1 and part 2, and it's designed as a funnel, or at least it could be used as a funnel. And you're going upriver, and there's a bunch of encounters to have up the river, and then you get to the end of the river, and there is a hag, and you got to go through her lair. As you can expect, there's some great art throughout this book. I love that piece there. I don't know why I love it so much, but I really do. It just kind of has this. Well, it reminds me of Lord of the Rings a little bit because of the canoes and I don't know. It brings me into the particular adventure really well. And you get the locales as you go upriver. And they're not like, they're kind of like encounter zones, encounter regions as you're going upriver, rather than just like monsters. And some of them are very simple, some of them are much more complex. And it reminds me of maybe kind of a take on things like, kind of more of a point crawl adventure, rather than a full-on hex crawl. And also more like a dungeon, but an overland dungeon. If you go back to the map, you can see that there's multiple routes upriver, and the players are going to be taking them, and as they go, they're going to be finding different paths forward. So this is what I've been saying before, right, where you have this idea of a dungeon bigger than just a place under the earth, like a complex underground. I love this idea where you have kind of a dungeon, but it's above ground, and it's distinct zones. Like this is a river, but there are distinct places along the river where you're going to be encountering different kinds of encounters. It's essentially a dungeon, but it just has a different packaging. I'm a big fan of that. So anyway, I think this is great, and I highly recommend that people check out Carcass Crawler issue 5. Really cool. I'll put a link below where you can get it. Next is Final Torch, issue 1. This is a Shadowdark zine, and I've already mentioned I think this is, really, really great. It's 80 pages, and it has a ton of stuff in here. So as you can see, you have a brief introduction, a few pages of the map, and then the key encounters on that map, and then an NPC that can be interactive with there, and then 3 full dungeons which detail different locations on that hex map. This was sent to me by the creator, Gelatinous Grim. So thank you very much for sending this over, Final Torch. It's really, really cool. This is the first zine. I think we're gonna see more coming up. So it's this first in a set. I think it's gonna be about something different. So I don't think they're all gonna be about this location. In fact, I think they're each gonna detail kind of a different hex or a different region, different tone, different theme. So a little bit like the last one we're gonna be doing, which is oh gosh, what's it called? Letters from the Dark. Letters from the Dark has each one is sort of a different theme and tone, and I think this is going to be doing the same thing. This Final Torch idea. You've got a great hex here, a great hex crawl here. 6 Mile hex with a lot of cool locations. It's very easy to read. You have different kinds of terrain. It's all jungle, so this is a jungle campaign or setting, sandbox here. And the 3 that are detailed in this adventure, or in this book, there's 3 adventures that are detailed in this zine, are sort of the Undertowed Queen 3 right here. So Rope Bridge Retreat, Serenity Cave, and Undertowed Queen. At least I tend to think of them as together. It's really about the Undertowed Queen. You have the Adelbog Crypt down here, and then you have the Overgrown Pyramid. Those are the 3 that are detailed. And I'll go through the kind of hex crawl a little bit, and I'll talk about a little bit of the dungeons as we go through. The thing I really like about it is the cartography of each dungeon, especially the pyramid. The Overgrown Pyramid is my favorite. I'm going to spend some time on that one because it's really cool. But you get a great hex crawl with a clear key, each of the locations laid out quite well. Again, I've mentioned this before. I think it'd be cool to maybe put this page is pretty full, and you don't have to flip very far back to find the map, but maybe finding a way of, well, I don't know if there's too many entries to really do that on each page. But I've been reading through the Dolmenwood book, and the way that they do the hex presentation is so clear and concise, and you get the map of each hex and the surrounding hexes on each page. That's great. And granted, I think there's a limit to just how big this scene they wanted to make this scene, but adding more detail maybe about each hex, not even that much more, but adding the map, or the location on the map and the surrounding hexes to it, maybe adding a little tiny encounter, because there are encounter tables later, but maybe just making a small encounter table for that hex. Obviously that's more work, and you could do that, right? You could do that yourself, but I think that would be like the next step. That'd be like the next step up. But again, this is a zine. This is not a full production or a full book or something like that. So for what this is, which is a zine, this is awesome. Don't get me wrong. This is really cool. But I like to see more maps. That's basically all I'm saying. I like to see more maps throughout a book. You get the description of each of the hexes, you get some encounters, and then you get the curator, who is the NPC, and someone that you could maybe use to give direction, be a quest giver, that sort of thing. The first adventure that you get in the book is the Sanctum of the Undertowed Queen, which is a 3rd level adventure. In fact, I don't think it's the lowest level adventure, so it's interesting that it starts with this one rather than the lowest level adventure. But it's a really cool adventure. You get these cool quotes at the start of each section, and then you get the overviews, what the players know, what the game master knows, the session options, and then the rumors. How to find the lair itself, the dungeon, notable hexes, the hex crawl exploration, mini hex encounters on the way. Here's a little map of the particular region around the lair. Each of these hexes is 25 feet. That's really small. I mean, you're really looking at like an encounter map, right? If you think of a 5-foot hex, this is just or a 5-foot square, this is just very slightly bigger than an encounter map. So this is a very zoomed in little mini hex crawl here. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting presentation. I don't think I've ever seen a hex map with 25-foot hexes. Factions of this particular dungeon, what the lair is like, and then the map of the lair. It's a really cool dungeon, And I like the fact that you get that river that kind of bisects it, which means you can just use the river as an navigation from room to room. So you can use that as a way of traveling. So there's sort of the left side, the right side, but then the river allows you to access, you can go down the river and go from 2 to 7 and skip, 3, 4, 5, and 6 if you want. You can go right to room 20. Now, the end of this has you going into the giant toad, which is a great, or at least you can go into the giant toad, which is a great little bit of this adventure. A big fan of that. The dungeon that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on is the second one in the book, which is The Secrets of the Overgrown Pyramid. This is a 4th level adventure. And the reason I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this, and I'm just going to go through most of this adventure, is because of the writing. I think it's really good. Deep within the heart of the dense jungle lies the fabled Overgrown Pyramid. This ancient structure, shrouded in vines, stands as a testament to a long-lost civilization whose purpose and creators remain an enigma. Local jungle inhabitants speak of the treasure of a long-forgotten king entombed within the pyramid's depths. The air hums with the ominous sounds of squawking birds and the screeches of nearby primates, and an ominous feeling lingers in the air. The pyramid, with no visible entrances, invites only the bravest souls willing to uncover its secrets. It was a great bit of writing, really evocative, brings you right in. And the idea here is there's this religious cult that is protecting the pyramid, protecting what's inside the pyramid, helping what's inside the pyramid, and you're there to get something. Probably treasure. Maybe to end what's going on inside the crypt. Here's what I love. I love this map. It's a great map. You have the secret entrance at the front, and then you go down. And as you go down, there's a couple obvious ways of proceeding. But then there's this giant tree that you can climb and reach different levels that way. Climb down and reach different levels that way. That's great. Super, super cool. Some great art there from Denizens of the Dark. And then on this one, you do get maps on every page. You get that for the previous one, too. You get maps on every page for each section of the dungeon. Huge fan of that. Huge fan of that. The layout is actually quite easy to read. And it follows the kind of more traditional Shadowdark formatting that we've seen in a lot of Shadowdark. But there's good use of underlining, good use of bolding, good use of italics, good use of bullet points, what you see first, what searching reveals, particular DCs that you might want to get through. Now, when it says DC 25 strength check for entire party, I'm not sure if that means the combined rolls of everybody has to be above 25. I would imagine that's actually what that means. Or if it just means that that's got to be what it means, because a DC 25 strength check is almost impossible in Shadowdark. So it has to mean something like maybe, the combined rolls of the whole party if you can get over 25. One of those things where if you make a check, so there's only one way into this dungeon as far as I can see, as far as I can tell. I was about to say, there's only one entrance, and if you make a check to get into the entrance, which is what it looks like, and the players happen to fail it, well, what do you do? Right? Do you just hand wave it and say, yeah, well, you get it anyway? Well, there's a couple things. This one has an item that can automatically open the door, the Lost Eye. And the other thing that you can do is just, if they don't happen to have this magic item, or they don't think to use it, or whatever it might be, you could have the cult come through and open the door, right? And then they can take advantage of that. But it's always interesting when you put a check on the only way to get into a dungeon. But as this one indicates, there is another way through. So that's good. You get some flavor text throughout, but it is very terse. The writing is to the point. You don't get a lot of extra. It's like, here's what's going on here. Here's what's happening in this room. Boom. Right? There isn't any read aloud text. There isn't any extraneous stuff. It's just like to the point, each of the entries, which I'm a big fan of. You go down further and further, there's a creepy man eating fish. That's different than a man eating a fish, by the way. I guess you didn't hear the hyphen. Callard the Jester, or an elven bard. Sounds like something a bard would say. I love the fact that you're climbing down this giant trunk and there's these luminous lemurs in there. It's really cool. It's a good adventure, and it's one of those things the players are going to remember. Remember when we got into that random pyramid overgrown in the jungle and we went inside and there was this massive tree trunk we had to climb down within the pyramid? That's something the players are going to remember as you go down to it. you meet the king. So that's really cool. Really cool adventure. Now the mapping of Adelbog Crypt is very horrifying to me because it has a lot of art of spiders and like genuinely horrifying spiders that even just looking at them for a moment kind of makes my arachnophobia act up. So I'm actually not gonna flip through it and show it to you guys here because it really did actually, a couple of the pictures actually triggered like, oh, I can't look at that. But it suffices to say, another good dungeon. Deals with spiders and horrifying spider transformations and spider zombies, things that embed in your head and control you. Nasty, but cool looking from a kind of horrifying perspective. At the back of the book, you get a bunch of new monsters: the ape men, bark fairy, brambles, cavern worms, cavern bats, the swarm. Again, things like, I talked about this before, but stat blocks like the ape man, it's just a standard stat block. You can just say, you can just save space and say use, bandit from base book. If you're not going to actually produce, if you're not going to actually add in some kind of more interesting element to the stat block, which is what I would recommend, right? Give your monsters something cool they can do. If the ape man is just a stat block, okay, but give him something. He's an evolved ape with large protruding brow and intelligent glint in his eyes. He uses a spear. Give him something. Maybe a rend attack, or like a leap attack, or maybe he can, because he's an ape, maybe he can run, he can climb and grab you and drop you or something. Like, give some indication of something more, right? Again, the rest of many of the stat blocks in this book have something more, and that's really cool. But just having one little effect there, like the flitling, again, I'm not digging those stat blocks where you have no, like, what's the point of that stat block? Use something from the base book if you're not going to add some extra thing to it. But hey, most of them have really cool abilities, like Captain Jim Gray, who turns to sea salt if he dies. That's cool. And he's ghostly, a ghostly pirate. Get some cool monsters like the bramble with stone skin, right? Or the cavern worm, which is an ancient burrowing wingless dragon. That's awesome. It's fire blood, lava breath, it moves boulders, and has tough skin. So that stuff's really cool. Big fan of all that. So Final Torch, a fantastic zine, and I'm really excited for the rest of this series. I honestly, this came out of nowhere. Again, I was sent this, so thank you very much for sending it to me, because I had no idea this was out, and I am very excited for the next, which, by the way, the next one, issue 2, coming soon, is the Pirates of Barnacle Bay. And that's amazing, because if it's anything like this, it's going to be a great zine, because I love the content of this, more monsters, adventure seeds, all of that, dungeons, but also pirates. Because on the back burner, not my next campaign, that's going to be Dolmenwood, and probably not the one after that. I don't know what that will be, but I have some ideas. But the one after that is going to be pirates. And I'm slowly but surely putting together a lot of pirate material, and so this is going to be great. So anyway, again, thank you to Gelatinous and Grim for sending this to me, and I hope you guys check this one out. I'll put a link below to where you can get it. Finally, I'm going to cover Book of the Dead, which is Letters from the Dark, Volume 9. And as I said, I think this is my favorite of all of the Letters from the Dead series up to this point. And there have been some really good ones. I really like the Borderlands one. I really, really liked the Lucky Stars. I really liked the Monster Mash. I liked them all. But this one is my favorite because of the writing and the tone and just a lot of the extra stuff that went into this. You get one of these great introductions by, in this case, it's a guy named Shanks. Now, this book has some great stuff. You have new ancestries, some new deities, Egyptian-inspired, rules for 10th level and ways of thinking about 10th level and adventures beyond 10th level, new relics, which are very powerful magic items, curses and a whole bunch of new curses along with jinxed items and traps, and a whole bunch of cool ideas for traps and ways to develop your own traps, which is obvious. It's an obviously great connection to an old Egyptian set, right? Because those pyramids and the treasure chambers and the traps down there and all that stuff. I'm always reminded, if you guys have never seen The Mummy with, oh gosh, I forget all the characters, all the actors' names now. Brendan Fraser, of course, is the main character, or sort of the main character, one of the main characters. But when they're first breaking into the first tomb, a bunch of the workers get killed by pressurized salt acid. It's so creepy and so cool. It melts them, it like sprays out. It's this really, really concentrated salt, and it just melts them. So along with some great traps. And then you have a whole bunch of stats for monsters, and then you get stats for undead specifically, and then you get a bunch of lich pharaohs. And they're like boss monster pharaohs who are really powerful with an extended stat block and all that stuff. And then you get a particular bunch of pyramids and setting, kind of. It's a relatively small setting. You get a handful of locations and some brief descriptions of those locations, and then you get a couple major dungeons, a few major dungeons. All in all, this book is 88 pages. Like, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm going to go through some of the really cool elements, especially of things like, I would say, the traps, some of the monsters, and then a couple of the dungeons. Here are the basic ideas for the traps, and it's good advice. So designing a trap, how to do it, and it has, I think, one of the best pieces of advice for traps, which is an indicator. Something unusual about the situation that hints at the trap's nature, right? So, lots of DMs at this point have talked about this, how to do traps, and the sort of traps where it's like, haha, I got you. I hate those traps, right? Never use those traps. Where there's no way the players could have found it, and it just acts and it kills them. So no, don't do that. There should always be a good trap should be able to be detected, right, and be overcome, even if it just means the players get used to tapping with a 10-foot pole. Okay, fine, but they should have some way of detecting the trap, right? Maybe, and it gives magic like detect traps an actual use. Now, if they don't, I guess it kind of goes back, if you always have something very obvious the players can see about a trap, well then something like detect traps is not as useful. But the sort of, what would I say? The sort of rule of thumb is the more deadly the trap, the more obvious it should be. Right? That's basically the traps 101 when you're designing dungeons, right? The more deadly the trap, the more obvious it should be. Things that are minor inconveniences, darts that shoot out and deal a point of damage or d4 damage, okay, those can be pretty well hidden, and the players can be like, we need to be on our toes, right? They can kind of come out of nowhere and surprise you. But if it's going to kill a character, just like it's like, save or die, no rocks fall, everybody dies sorts of traps, right? Like, no, if it's deadly, it should be obvious that it's deadly. And maybe that obvious danger is just simply the circumstances in which the players are finding themselves, right? Like maybe you've made it very clear that this tunnel is unstable and it is shaky. And every turn, bits of dust are falling from the ceiling, right? And the players still, decide they're going to have a battle there, or they're going to break the support beams. Okay, it's not really a trap so much, but it acts as a trap and it kills them all. All right, fair enough. I would probably be unhappy if, I got a TPK that way, but it would be on the players, not on the DM. Okay, so anyway, there's a whole bunch of example traps. I'm not going to go through them, but this is just great advice for how to approach trap building in a DM, in a game. Really cool. Here are some of the monster stat blocks that you get. And what I really like about this is that every stat block has something interesting about it. Even something very simple, like the catfolk has riding reflex. I was about to say lightning reflex, but I was like, wait, that's not lightning reflex. Riding reflex. Immune to fall damage, right? Because cats always land on their feet. Or at least that's the old saying. Right, so every stat block has something interesting. The hyena has the bone crush. Attacks critically hit on a natural 18 through 20. That's a really powerful ability. To crit the d6, 10% extra. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. You get a few pages of regular monsters, and then you get undead. And this is sort of how to make undead special. There's a few pages of this as well, right? There's undead tiers, undead types, ghost features, skeleton features, zombie features, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how to make your monsters extra. Undead creatures extra, because you're going to go down into tombs. That's really cool. How to make your special creatures even more special down there. And then finally you get 3 lich pharaohs. They're really cool. Hauknef, Kambek, and Atahu. I would imagine that's how you say them or something like that. But you get stat blocks like the one you see here for Hocknef, which is the feline-faced specter. Ice-cold blood trickles from her fangs. She's very powerful. A legendary undead with a spirit vessel because she's a lich. Sunlight sensitivity because she's sort of vampiric, I guess. Incorporeal because she's kind of a ghost. So you have a vampire lich ghost. That's pretty dangerous. Level 18, she better be pretty dangerous. She has a couple really cool abilities. Blood Drip, Midnight Howl, and Possession. And all of the lich pharaohs are like this. Very powerful. Bosses for sure. Here's the hex map that you get when you run this. There are descriptions of each of those locations along with the encounters you get in each of these places. So on Het is the name of the region, and your goal is to get to the kind of up the river. I think it's up the river. No, it looks like it's down river. Yeah, it looks like you're going to the sea. But at the mouth of the river are 3 pyramids, and that's where the sort of the dungeons are in this book. Here's one of the dungeons. Now, as I said, there's several pyramids, but here's the Night Pyramid. Rules for crawling it, the basic rules there, and then the locations of the Lich Pharaoh, Hocknef, depends on the current lunar phase. You can decide, or you can use the real-world lunar phase, or you can just choose what your lunar phase is, but that depends. That changes where the Spectre Hocknef is. Random encounters down here, and a brief overview, sort of an isometric view of the dungeon as a whole, and then you get the individual sections of the pyramids here with the room descriptions, very clear maps, very easy to read. I am a big fan. All of the room numbers are hyperlinked, which is awesome. So you can click on it and go right to the location. The locations are laid out very, very well, easy to read, no wasted space. Everything's to the point and direct. Very, very cool. Again, I hope you guys can tell why this is my favorite of the Letters from the Dark, or Letters to the Dark. It's got all the stuff that I most like. Really cool. Some fantastic art throughout. Just really flavorful, draws you right in. Really great. And again, more of these descriptions that are just excellent. Got lots of cool magic in here, lots of cool treasure in here, lots of cool adventuring to happen in here. All in all, there are 3 pyramids. There is the Night Pyramid, the River Pyramid, and the Solar Pyramid. And all 3 have to be kind of defeated, I would imagine. Kind of got to go through all 3, and you get this aftermath of what will happen if you do the right things or the wrong things, or what will happen if you go through these adventures. Possible consequences afterwards. You get a couple pages at the very end with compatibility legal and what the next issue is going to be, which I'm also very excited about. At issue 10 from Letters of the Dark is going to be Adventures in Archaeology, which is rules for pulpy modern adventures, like real-world adventures, so set in our world, in the 1930s and 40s. So Indiana Jones, essentially. So it's a good follow-up to this one, and it kind of fits with the last 2 that we've just done, which is Final Torch, sort of jungle adventures and desert adventures. So Letters from the Dark, Volume 9, Book of the Dead, fantastic. I think all 3 of these are excellent. They're very different, but I'll put links below to where you can get them, but they're all excellent. 2 of these are for Shadowdark, this one, of course, and Final Torch, and then Carcass Crawler issue 5 is for Old School Essentials. Well, that'll do it for this one, everybody. Hope it's been interesting, and I'll see you all in another